Welcome back to the Little Growth Podcast. I'm your host, Damson. And if you have not yet done so, be sure to follow, be sure to subscribe on my YouTube channel, on my Spotify, and on my Apple Podcasts. And also be sure to leave ratings and reviews wherever you find this podcast so that it can boost more engagement and reach out to a wider audience like you today. We are talking about why so many brilliant ideas never see the light of day. That's what we are going to be covering on this episode. And we are going to dive into the killers of innovation. Statistically, about 90% of all innovation projects fail. Humans naturally despise failure and prefer to bury it deep, making it extremely difficult to learn and begin again. Joining me on the show is the CEO of Impala Express, and he goes by the name Bwogi Kevin. Bwogi Kevin, glad to have you on the show.
I'm glad to be here, Damson.
Yeah. We're going to be looking at a literal cemetery of failed innovation today.
That's right.
Yes. So, follow-up question now. Research shows that 95% of launched consumer products fail each year. Why are we so conditioned to view this as a dead end rather than a teaching experience?
Thank you for the question. We are so conditioned to view this as a dead end because rather than a teaching experience, because we grew up being taught that failure was bad. Like every time you would go to school, you would have to aim higher or like really pass your papers in order to impress your parents, right? So if you failed, they wouldn't take it lightly, right? So we would end up fearing failure. So we are conditioned to see it as a dead end because we feel like there's nothing you can get from it. If you see something as bad, you can't clearly say that I'm going to get something good out of it.
Yes.
And if we're being honest, it's from the bad things that happen if we realize the good things we have. So failure has been put across as something that is bad, that shouldn't be experienced, that shouldn't be seen in society. And that is wrong. That is why we fail to evolve. So it is our responsibility to uncondition ourselves so that we don't treat it as a dead end, but rather a teaching experience for us.
So we are unlearning and we are learning.
True.
That's pretty much how life goes.
True.
It's just a series of learning and unlearning. And in this case, we have to fight that conditioning that has been placed in us from a young age.
Yes. Yes, indeed.
We're moving on to the next segment of this episode, and we are going to be talking about the stigma of fitting in. We often play it safe because we think following the rules is the best way to avoid failure, but that pattern is actually dangerous. Seth Godin points out that in a crowded marketplace, fitting in is failing. I'm also going to take you through philosophy. There is a saying by Aristotle that there is only one way to avoid criticism. Do nothing, say nothing, and be nothing. And another example, in Germany, research shows that the social stigmatization of failure leads to a negative perception that discourages risk-taking. Bwogi, on to you. If the only way to avoid failure is to be nothing, how are we to convince the generation that the killers of innovation are worth fighting against?
Well, how do we convince our generation that the killers of innovation are worth fighting against? Well, that's a really good question. Well, we encourage them to try as much and fail as fast and as open. Well, you're going to say, fail, like Kevin, who was supposed to be winning. Well, we are, but you never know when you're going to win if you don't try. And if you don't try, you're not going to face those failures. You're not going to get those failures that maybe teach you a lesson to improve. And you're not going to be able to create something innovative if you don't push yourself to the limits. Damson, I'd like to share with you some experience of mine.
Please share.
I started off my journey wanting to be a CEO, because you mentioned at the beginning how I was a CEO. So I started my journey with a payments system platform. And I would say it was a bumpy ride. It was truly bumpy. But I kept on, failing at getting the systems together, failing at putting the necessary resources together.
Yeah.
And that really affected me. I kept on looking at failure as a bad thing. And with that, time moved and I wasn't making any progress. So I decided to sit down and revisit my projects and make sure that there's something, I'm not leaving anything out. I studied my failures and I realized there were very many factors that affected the given situation and I did not anticipate for that led to these failures. And I realized most of those things could be changed or worked upon or improved. And that is what made me want to improve even more. So for every failure I had, I went ahead and made its improvement. I got its solution and I tried doing it better. And in my current company that I'm running, I believe I'm still getting failures here and there, but I'm using those failures as my learning blocks to push forward. So we have to convince our generation that failure is part of life and it is what will get us from being ordinary to being extraordinary. Yes.
I'm still taken aback and still digesting everything that has been said.
Well,
I have nothing else to add.
Yeah.
So on to the next end. Not all failure is created equal.
Yes.
So in this episode, I want us to draw a vital distinction between what we know as stupid failure and noble failure. That's right. There is noble failure and there is stupid failure. There's a former CEO of Charles Schwab. His name is David Potrak. He argues that rewarding for simply failing is ridiculous, but we must differentiate and reward the noble failure. So to be a noble failure, it requires proper preparation, a fundamental understanding of action and consequence, and a clear plan of implementation. Drawing on a philosophical insight from one Friedrich Nietzsche, he famously wrote about amor fati, the love of one's fate. He believed we should embrace everything that happens, including failure, as a necessary part of life. So the question to you, Bwogi, is we're looking at the 4 categories of innovation failure. There are organizational categories, individual, team, and approach factors. While looking at these four, how do we train ourselves to ensure our mistakes are noble and not just stupid?
Well, thank you for that question. So we're looking at four categories of innovation failure.
Yeah.
There's organizational, individual, team, and approach factors. So starting with organizational, you have to be organized. Drawing from my past projects,
Yes.
I was fairly organized, but I did not bother to gather enough data on everything and structures that I was responsible of having. And this kept me in a loop, trying to figure things out in a somewhat way that is not really effective. So I kept on producing amateur results. But until I put my organizational site and structure and made it proper, I realized that there were so many things I could get done much easily, and made sure that there was no room for error when it came to the organizational bit.
Yeah.
Then individual. Now, as a person, you have to set systems. And in your past podcasts you've had that I've been enjoying listening to, Damson really makes the best podcasts here.
He shows us the goals versus systems episode.
Yes, goals versus system. You have to set systems as an individual to better help you as a person and as a young CEO or entrepreneur trying to make a name for yourself in this country. If you do not set systems that set you apart from your competition and from your old self, because we really think we're in competition with others, but when we're in competition with ourselves.
Yes.
So if we can't do things better, if we don't build systems that make us better, we are not going to be any better than our competition. We're still going to be in the same loop.
Yeah, true.
Yes. Then team. Team is funny because the friends you bring on board can determine how far you go.
Yeah.
Once you have the right team on board, anything it can be accomplished. Once you have the wrong team on board, you're going to fail faster than, I don't know, a matchstick goes out. But when you to build a team, look for skills rather than how connected these people may be. Well, Damson, you could come to me and say, maybe I want a gig, or you want to get a gig in the business, but you really don't have the skills required to actually do anything or add any value to the company.
Yeah.
As much as you may be a friend, I'm not going to look at the fact that our friendship has come from years. We have known ourselves since we're little. It's going to matter whether you offer value to the company or not.
Yes.
So if you don't offer the value that is needed, I can't put you on. But if you do, well and good, you'll be on. So picking your team is very essential. And ensuring that you have a good team will take you further than just picking people and putting them together. And last but not least, the other category.
The approach?
Yes, the approach. The approach is tricky because when you're starting out, the first thing, you never know how you're going to start. You don't know where to start from. I'll take it from an example of experience I had when setting up Impala Express, building it from ground up. the approach to how to do the whole thing was quite in a mystery. It was a mystery for me. I wasn't fond of the industry. I didn't know that much about the industry. I, I can still say I'm not that conversant of it, but I've done my level best to bridge that gap. So, approach the way you're going to do your thing, lay it down, be structured. Know that if you're going to do something and you don't know maybe something about it, or you're lacking information about a task that you need to commit to, look for a way of changing your approach towards that task and see what else you can do that may give you, you know, the same or much better results than the one you are looking at that very moment. So those four factors once dealt with completely and structurally, I assure you, you will be able to avoid stupid failures. Because once you have those four categories sorted out and worked on efficiently, you're guaranteed of having success. But even if you fail, that will be taken as a noble failure rather than you who maybe messed up one or all the categories, which will now be regarded as stupid failure. Yes.
Very true. I like that insight. I have nothing else to add on that. You have just dissected it, you have killed it, you've taken it home. Yeah.
Thank you.
So allow us to take a break and we'll be back to you with more. Welcome back to the show. So we're going on to our next segment of this episode. We're going to look at something called burying the evidence of your failures. Something that I learned from an organization called Atari. So let's look at the extreme lengths we go to hide our mistakes. In 1992, Atari produced 5 million cartridges of the E.T. game, but it was a financial disaster. They literally buried 728,000 copies in a landfill in New Mexico to hide the failure. What insight do I draw from this story that I've just told you? What you try to bury might come back to haunt you. As Brené Brown puts it, there is no innovation and creativity without failure, period. And also in the lines of philosophy, Socrates believed that the unexamined life is not worth living. Applying this to innovation, an unexamined failure is a wasted opportunity. So the question to you, Bwogi, why is digging up our failures the only way to get to the root causes instead of just being satisfied with the proximate causes of failure?
Wow, that's a good question, Damson. Well, let's begin. Digging up your failures can teach you a lot of things. You can gain so much knowledge from knowing and understanding your failures. When I started out my journey of being a CEO, I didn't have all the things figured out yet. I wasn't well versed with the knowledge of how to run a business, those different innovations to come up with. I didn't know any of those things. But as I went along with time, I failed. I kept on failing. And through those failures, I learned to study them, pick them up, study them, try to understand why I made that move, why I did what I did, and I ended up failing. And it taught me that failures can teach you more than what people say you can get from a failure. People hide from failures. But if you want to be innovative, if you want to be creative, you have to be willing to embrace failure. Because it's a part of us.
Yeah.
You can't be perfect 100%. It's not there.
It's not.
But if you wake up every day and say, I'm going to do whatever I can do to my best abilities, even if I fail, I'll use that failure as a learning point to educate myself, to re-strategize, and to come back better than before. So that's why I believe that digging up failures can get us the root causes so that we are able to make improvements compared to thinking of what may have caused it. So yes, that's my view on it.
Well, that's there's no better way to close that off. I have no addition to what you have just told us. Okay. We're moving on to the next segment, probably the last one for this episode, and we're going to look at the VUCA world, the VUCA world. It's a certain acronym that we picked from this article where we're basing off of to give you this episode. We live in a VUCA world. By V, I mean volatile. U, uncertain. C, complex. And A, ambiguous. In this environment, the potential for failure is an integral part of business. Philosophically, the Stoic philosopher Seneca said, misfortune is virtue's opportunity. He believed that without challenges or failures, we never truly know our own strength. So we need to develop the mindset to deal with failure in the best possible way to gain insights for the future. For this segment, Bwogi, how can young innovators build such systems that allow them to handle the individual killer factors like groupthink or lack of courage?
Well, that's a good question. So how can young innovators build such systems that allow them to handle individual killer factors like groupthink or lack of courage? Well, they have to understand their journey, their goal. They have to have a direction that they're following or that they want to undertake. And in order to do this, they have to sit down and look around themselves and find out what's their purpose, what's their goal, what do they want to achieve in life, what do they want to get involved in, what do they want to do. So that in that understanding, you start building from that. You start adding small aspects or let me say superpowers onto the original superpowers you have to build the necessary systems required to be successful. So once you have a goal and a direction that you want to follow, in my case, I was really interested in logistics. And that's why I got the motivation to build Impala Express, the company mentioned at the beginning.
So it's a courier services company, right?
Yes, we provide businesses with courier services, last mile delivery services, if they have orders to fulfill, they want to deliver their products to their customers, we are the service they call upon to do so.
Okay. Thank you so much for dissecting this question that I asked you about the. I believe young innovators can actually pick up a leaf on what you have just shared with us. So there is nothing more I can add them from there. So we're going to close up, wind up this episode. It's been a very fruitful discussion. To learn and improve means to better understand the causes and killers of innovation. Failure has become very trendy of late, but that's not enough. We need the willingness to evaluate what went wrong. So, Bwogi, thank you so much for helping us navigate this cemetery of innovation today.
It was a pleasure, Damson. I enjoyed dissecting this with you.
Okay, so I'm going to leave us with a final thought from a philosopher named John Paul Sartre. He said, commitment is an act, not a word. True innovation requires the act of committing to the process, even when failure is likely. So the challenge for us this week, for listeners that are getting to listen to this episode up to this point, evaluate a recent mistake and draw a distinction on whether it was a noble failure with preparation and analysis, or whether you can turn it into a noble failure one day. Do me a favor and take a screenshot of this episode and post it on your Instagram story and tag me in it.growth20. And in the caption, share or post 1 kilo of innovation that you have faced this week. Use the hashtag #LittleGrowthInnovation. I'm Damson Kevin, and this has been the Little Growth Podcast, along with my guest, Bwogi Kevin, the CEO of Impala Express Courier Services. Thank you for being with us on the show. A final take for everyone as we wrap up. Don't bury your failures, study them. I'll see you in the next one.